For the third time in 4 years, Notre Dame is ranked in the top 10 of the AP Preseason Top 25, which means everyone in the college football world is going to be asking the same question. Is Notre Dame overrated, or could they actually be underrated? That's next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. And today is Tuesday, August 13th. Thank you for getting your day started right here by making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports. And you can watch this show on YouTube, or you can listen wherever you get your podcast. For those of you watching along, please remember, like the video below by hitting that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. Or for you podcast listeners, please rate the show 5 stars and leave a review and subscribe if you have not already. I promise it goes a really long way in helping support the show. So I appreciate everyone who's done so already and everyone who did what I said and just rated the show 5 stars and did all that good stuff. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com and add a big win to your summer bucket list. Okay, it's good to be back. We've got a lot to talk about today. The AP Preseason Top 25 came out. Notre Dame was in the top 10. I think there's a lot of discourse going on about Notre Dame as well as a lot of other teams in the top 25. We're going to get to that. Also, Notre Dame landed a big-time commitment over the weekend. It might not really move the needle on the recruiting rankings because Brandon Logan, the 3-star safety who committed to Notre Dame this past weekend, is only like the third lowest ranked recruit in this class, but I find him very compelling for a bunch of different reasons. So we are going to get to that in segment 2. And then I'm going to predict how Notre Dame's class is going to finish out in 2025 because they have been in a bit of a slump lately. But I think that there is a way for this class to finish strong, and fans will be happy about the class of 2025 after a roller coaster past couple months. So we are going to get to all of that later on. But let's just start with the Associated Press in their preseason top 25 that came out on Monday. Notre Dame was ranked number 7 in this ranking. They were also ranked number 7 in the coaches poll. So it does seem like, the people who have a say in these rankings are pretty consistent with where they believe Notre Dame should be at this point in time. And to be honest with you, I think that preseason polls are usually a waste of time. I think the only reason that these rankings exist is to generate discussion and maybe more specifically outrage because the season is getting close. They want to get fans excited. They want to get fans riled up. And rankings certainly do a good job of that. Like, I've made this point before about college football fans that they are extremely territorial. They take everything that anyone says about their team personally. Look, I'm guilty of it too. But when it comes to rankings, man, people get really, really upset. So when we look at Notre Dame, I think a lot of people are wondering, are they overrated? Are they underrated? Should Notre Dame fans be upset? Should they be happy about where they're at? And to be honest, I think they're very accurately rated. I think that 7th is a perfect spot for Notre Dame. I have no issue with Notre Dame being ranked there. They clearly have one of the most talented rosters in the country. They added Riley Leonard, one of the top, if not the top quarterbacks in the transfer portal. Veteran, ton of upside, ton of athleticism, but there's questions about him. They have a very talented running back duo in Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, but they're a little bit inexperienced. What are they going to do this season? We think they have a much improved wide receiver room, but then again, Notre Dame's wide receivers have hurt us in the past, so it's difficult to say for certain what that's going to be. On the offensive line, ton of question marks, especially after Charles Jagasaw suffered a season-ending injury with a torn pec. We do know that they have a great defense. We do know that they have one of the best defensive tackle tandems in the entire country. Howard Cross, Riley Mills, they've got Jordan Botelho and R.J. Oben at the rush ends. R.J. Oben, one of the best rush ends in the transfer portal. Young, but very talented linebackers, one of, if not the best cornerbacks in the entire country, and Benjamin Morrison, the returning Bronco Nagurski Award winner, Xavier Watts at safety. So there's a lot of talent on this team. They have 2 of the best coordinators in college football in Mike Denbrock and Al Golden, but there are some questions about Marcus Freeman and what he has done so far at Notre Dame with back-to-back disappointing seasons if you look at what they were ranked in the preseason. So this is a really good team. They certainly have their flaws, but if you look at the top 25, most teams do. I think everyone who has a say, everyone has a vote, has basically the same top 4 teams, just depends on which order they put them in. It's some combination of Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, and Texas. That is how the AP ranked these top 4 teams. And look, I totally agree with that. Every single one of those teams I just mentioned had better seasons than Notre Dame did last year, and they all project to be as good or better this season. I mean, Georgia, they're at the top of college football now. They've got the best coach in the country now that Nick Saban has retired. Ohio State is going all in on this season, both literally and financially. They have spent a boatload of money on their roster. They also added Chip Kelly, who was the head coach of UCLA last year. Now he's their offensive coordinator. They're doing everything they possibly can to beat Michigan, win a Big Ten championships, and then in their mind, hopefully win a national championship. So they have good reason to be up there. In the top two, Oregon, Texas. I know Oregon lost both their games against Washington last year, but Dan Lanning is building a monster over there. They were really aggressive in the transfer portal. Texas made it to the college football playoff. Honestly, had a crazy charge there at the end. They almost upset Washington, or I guess I shouldn't say upset, but they almost came back to shock Washington there in the final minute. They returned Quinn Ewers, a bunch of other guys, added Isaiah Bond from Alabama in the transfer portal. So there's no legitimate argument in my mind that Notre Dame should be ranked higher than those guys. I will say I was a little bit surprised to see Alabama ranked 5th, especially considering the fact that Nick Saban retired. Yes, I understand they went to the college football playoff last season. They returned their quarterback, Jalen Milroe, but there's a lot of questions about that team, and I think that if Nick Saban were the coach, I would have less questions about the fact that they're number 5. Look, Kalen DeBoer is a great coach, not doubting him and what he's capable of and whether or not he was a good hire at Alabama, but Nick Saban maximized that team last year. Is Kalen DeBoer going to be able to do the same this year? That remains to be seen. I guess you could make the argument that Notre Dame should be ranked higher than Ole Miss, who is ranked 6th, one spot ahead of Notre Dame. They did lose their running back, Kinshon Judkins, in the transfer portal, but they also added Walter Nolan, Princely, the edge rusher from Florida, Antoine Wells, another good wide receiver, and I love Jackson Dart, their quarterback. He is just reckless out there, and it kind of is in contrast to how he looks, right, with the long, blonde, flowy hair, but he plays with reckless abandon. He is not afraid to get hit, and he's got a really good arm as well. I like Lane Kiffin as their coach. So when I look at the top 6, I guess you can make a little bit of an argument about Ole Miss, but overall, I think Notre Dame is very comfortable at 7. And then behind them, I think they're better than Penn State. I think they're better than Michigan. I think Michigan is going to drop off a little bit more than people expect. They lose a lot of talent. I think Notre Dame is better than Florida State, who's ranked 10th, and everyone else. So, like I said, I think the AP got it right with Notre Dame at 7. I think the coaches poll got it right with Notre Dame at 7. And even though I might think that preseason polls are a waste of time, I will give the AP some credit here. They've been pretty spot on about Notre Dame in recent years for the most part. You look at where they were ranked at the beginning of 2023, started number 13, they finished number 14. 2022, they were way too high on Notre Dame. This was a bit of an outlier. Notre Dame was ranked 5th in the country, which is so hard to process now when we know how that season ended up. But then you look back and you look at all the teams that were ranked in the top 25 that year. There were so many questions about all those teams. So I think it was more so like Notre Dame, like one of those teams had to be in the top 5, and they just picked Notre Dame because of what they did in 2021, where they started at number 9, they finished number 8. They finished at number 18 in 2022. So I guess it wasn't that bad, but it felt a lot worse. 2020, they started ranked 10th. They finished number 5. 2019, they started number 9. They finished number 12. 2018, they started number 12, finished number 5. And then 2017, they were actually unranked coming off that 4-8 season, but they finished number 11. So Notre Dame has finished better than their preseason ranking 4 out of the past 7 years by an average of about 1.8 spots. So overall, I think the AP does a pretty good job of predicting where Notre Dame should be at the beginning of the season. So whenever I hear people say, oh, Notre Dame is always overrated, and they look at the fact that Notre Dame is in the top 10 and immediately dismiss them, like, that's fine. I actually appreciate it because it tells me everything I need to know about that person and their college football intellect. Like, they're telling on themselves, and it's actually, they're basically doing us a service, because if they say, oh, Notre Dame is overrated, they're either ignorant or delusional. In either way, like, I have no real interest in listening to that person talk about college football. They're telling on themselves. So I'm like, all right, cool. Thank you for telling me that I don't have to listen to you and I can just ignore it. Maybe when I was younger, I'd get a lot more riled up about that stuff when people who clearly didn't know what they were talking about would say some ignorant things about Notre Dame. I would get really upset and frustrated and I'd argue with them. And really now I think I'm at a place where I don't need to do that. I'm very comfortable with where I am in my Notre Dame fandom. Sure, it's a little bit extreme. I mean, I do a podcast every single day about this team, but I do think that that stuff doesn't bother me anymore, and it shouldn't bother you either, because I think Notre Dame has done enough over the past couple of years to prove that we don't really need to listen to those doubters or naysayers, especially when they're just doing it without any real evidence to back it up. And unfortunately, that happens far more often than it should when it comes to college football analysis. So I look at this ranking, I'm like, okay, if they're ranked number 7, the AP has done a pretty good job of predicting where Notre Dame is going to end up. Odds are they're going to finish somewhere in the top 10 there. And if this is how the rankings ended up following the conference championship weekend, Notre Dame would actually be the 9th seed because of the way the conference championship automatic qualifiers play out. So if we were to go with the top 4 seeds being based off of like the highest rated team in each conference here, each Power 4, Georgia would be the 1 seed, Ohio State would be 2, Florida State would be 3, and then Utah would be 4, with Florida State being the ACC champ, Utah being the Big 12 champ, which means the next 5 ranks, based on the at-large bids, we go Oregon, Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Notre Dame. So it would only be 2 spots off their preseason ranking at the 9th seed, but the difference in terms of their path in the college football playoff is obviously significant because there's a gigantic difference between finishing in the 5th seed and playing, most likely, the highest-ranked Group of 5 team in a home game in that first-round matchup compared to playing Ole Miss on the road in an 8-9 game. That is a much, much more difficult task for Notre Dame. So another thing that these rankings taught me is that Notre Dame basically needs to finish undefeated this season if they want to get the 5 seed. It's just probably not going to happen otherwise. And I understand that it's probably not going to be this crowded at the top with so many teams from the top two conferences in the Big Ten and the SEC because they're probably going to beat up on each other quite a bit here. So it's probably going to be a little bit more diverse there at the top. But when you look at Notre Dame's schedule and the fact that it's pretty weak, or at least we think it is right now, I mean, they only have 3 teams on their schedule in the top 25, Florida State being the highest ranked one at number 10, Texas A&M right behind them at number 20, and then USC number 23. Like right now, that's probably not going to cut it. Maybe Louisville cracks it. I was actually kind of surprised they were not in the preseason top 25, but that's another big takeaway I have about these rankings, that Notre Dame probably needs to be undefeated to get that 5th spot. That's not to say that they can't win a playoff game if they are not the 5th seed, if they come in at 8 or 9 or anything like that. It's possible, but if we want to make a serious run, if Notre Dame is going to win multiple games, like that's asking a lot if they're in the 9th seed, where if they're at the 5 seed, much better chances for them going forward. So a lot to take in from these rankings. Even though I said it earlier, I don't think they mean all that much. I do think that it's pretty telling in terms of what Notre Dame's path is going to be and what the schedule looks like right now. Obviously, a lot of this is subject to change because these are just preseason rankings. But you want to know the best part about these rankings is that it means football season is really close. We're under 3 weeks away now, and I cannot wait for talking season to be over and we can actually watch some football. But even though the season is about to start, recruiting certainly never sleeps, and they got some good news on the recruiting trail when they picked up a commitment from who I believe is the most interesting prospect in the class over the weekend. It's coming up right after this. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing quite like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Okay, here's my pick. I'm going to look ahead of the future here. We're going to stay in Major League Baseball. I like the Baltimore Orioles to win the AL East. Right now, they're underdogs. They're plus 140. At the time of this recording, they are tied with the Yankees for that first spot in the AL East. And look, it could go either way. Aaron Judge is most likely going to win the AL MVP. But there's something about this Orioles team. They're scrappy, and I always root for the underdog in baseball because as a fan of the Cleveland Guardians, I do respect the small market teams. So I think the Orioles are going to be able to beat out the Yankees, the juggernaut, all that, and they are going to win the AL East division. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, let's talk some recruiting, and I actually have some good news to talk about this time around because over the weekend, Notre Dame picked up their 22nd commitment in the class of 2025 and 3-star safety Brandon Logan out of nearby Fort Wayne. And look, Logan is not going to move the needle very much on any of the composite rankings. He's the 3rd lowest ranked commitment in this class, but I think that he is the most interesting player in the entire class for multiple reasons. First off, he is an elite dual sport athlete. He's going to play football and baseball at Notre Dame, and he possesses elite athleticism. He's been committed to play baseball at Vanderbilt since November of 2021. And if you don't follow college baseball, that much, let me just tell you that Vanderbilt is one of the premier programs in the entire sport. They've won 2 national championships. I believe in the past decade, they routinely put out some of the best prospects into Major League Baseball. Like, they are an absolute powerhouse. So the fact that he had a scholarship offer to play baseball at Vanderbilt at such a young age tells you just how good of a baseball player that he is. But because he's been committed to play baseball at Vanderbilt for so long, most football programs were not really looking at him that hard because they just figured he's going to end up playing baseball in college. That's why Notre Dame didn't recruit him that hard, but they did offer him a preferred walk-on spot several months ago. And look, I understand that the best recruits in the country typically play more than one sport in high school. I mean, if you're a great football player, you're probably a great basketball player, baseball, all of that as well. But it's very rare that a player can earn a scholarship in both sports from the very best that the sport has to offer. I'm not talking about like a really good football player who's a great athlete who could play basketball at, let's say, I don't know, Kent State or something like that. This guy could play at literally one of the best baseball programs in the entire country in baseball, or he could play football for one of the best football teams in the country. So that is very rare, and that is why I think he is so interesting, and his athleticism jumps out in both sports. I would say right now, it's safe to say that Brandon Logan is a better baseball player than he is a football player. That's why Vanderbilt offered him at such a young age. But hey, Indiana and Iowa also offered him a football scholarship as well. And even though those two aren't like the cream of the crop in college football, still, the fact that these are 2 Big Ten schools who looked at him were like, look, this guy has shown enough on the football field for us to offer him a full-ride scholarship. That tells you something. According to Tim Preeser, friend of the program, from Irish Illustrated, Brandon Logan had a .441 batting average in 26 stolen bases this past spring in high school baseball. Those are insane numbers. It means he's basically getting a hit every other time he steps up in the plate. And then when he doesn't get a hit, or when he does get a hit and he gets on base, he's probably stealing that base. But he also racked up 95 tackles, including 6 interceptions, 4 of which were returned to the house. He had 4 pick sixes on the football field last fall on his way to leading his team to a state championship in 5A football in Indiana. He is a really good football player. The only reason he's not rated higher is because most of the football recruiting services did not expect him to play football, so they did not spend that much time scouting him and evaluating him compared to other prospects in this class. Now that he's committed to play for Notre Dame, I fully anticipate he is going to skyrocket up the rankings during his senior year. I think right now, I'm pulling it up on the 24/7 Sports Composite. Yeah, so they got him as the number 725th player in the class. But again, I don't even think he was on the rankings a couple weeks ago, but then he committed to Notre Dame, and now I think they're like, all right, we got to look at this guy a little bit more seriously as a football player. And to be clear, he is going to play baseball at Notre Dame too. He is still a better baseball player, but now the fact that he was willing to decommit from playing baseball at one of the top programs in the country shows you how much he cares about playing big-time college football. And look, personally, if you could pick which sport to go pro in, baseball or football, I think baseball is the much smarter option because it's far less taxing on your body, way more money, all of which is guaranteed. But playing big-time college football is something that is really special and probably provides a little bit more fun, especially during the college experience, than playing college baseball. No offense to all the baseball players out there, but I think most of you would agree. I think when you look at Brandon Logan, if you're trying to make a comparison, it's Jordan Faison. Now, it's obviously a little bit different because Jordan Faison was fully committed to play lacrosse. He was on a lacrosse scholarship when he started out at Notre Dame. But similar in the fact that Jordan Faison was a really good high school football player in Florida, but he wasn't on any of the recruiting rankings because he was just looked at as a lacrosse prospect. But he was a preferred walk-on in the football team and made a lot of noise when he was on the football field, specifically during preseason camp last year. I remember, for all the hype there was about Notre Dame, I shouldn't say for all the hype, for all the general optimism as there was about Notre Dame's wide receiving core last year, with young guys like Jaden Greathouse, Rico Flores looking to contribute right away, Tobias Merriweather, there was a lot of attention paid on the wide receivers. And then all of a sudden you hear about this undersized walk-on lacrosse player, Jordan Faison, beating all of the starting defensive backs in one-on-ones in practice. On one hand, you're like, okay, well, that's not good if the receiver making the most noise is a preferred walk-on. But we ended up seeing by the end of the season, hey, maybe it's because he's a legit player, because by the end of the year, he was one of Notre Dame's most productive playmakers on offense. He ended up winning the MVP in the Sun Bowl with over 100 receiving yards in that game. Took him a while for Notre Dame to play him, which honestly is probably worth another podcast another day when we look at what Notre Dame put out there against Duke at the receiver position and think, hey, why couldn't Jordan Faison play in that game when he ended up playing the week later against Louisville? Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I think in terms of athletic prowess, Faison and Brandon Logan are pretty similar. Logan is listed at 6 foot, 185. If that's true, I think it's a big if, because when you look at him, I don't think he's 6 feet tall. He's not 185 pounds. And as we know, heights and weights on recruiting profiles are rarely completely accurate. I think he looks more like 5'11", 175 to me. But you look at the fact that they're both very good athletes, both able to play two sports in college for very, very good programs, and the fact that they're being overlooked as football players, there's a lot of similarities there. Now, is Logan going to make the immediate impact that Jordan Faison did in his freshman year? I think that's pretty unlikely because Logan needs to bulk up a lot more to play safety, whereas like Jordan Faison can get out there. He can be a skinny guy playing wide receiver, maybe not an every down guy, but that's not what he was last year. So I think Logan has to bulk up significantly before he can be a regular contributor on the defense. He can still make some plays on special teams because his athleticism is really going to help him out there. But I do think he has a long way to go before he actually starts seeing the field on a regular basis for Notre Dame. And that obviously contrasts how I felt about Ivan Taylor, the former safety commit who flipped to Michigan last month. And let's all be honest about the situation. Brandon Logan is Ivan Taylor's replacement in this class. Pretty much from the moment that Ivan Taylor flipped, Brandon Logan was considered the top candidate to replace him. And even though I think Logan is a really compelling prospect and I'm excited about his traits, I don't want this to be misinterpreted at all. I would much rather have Ivan Taylor in this class. Taylor is bigger. Taylor is stronger. Taylor is more college ready. Taylor's dad played in the NFL for, I think, over a decade, and I think he is a better player and has a better future and a more certain future, like a higher floor than Brandon Logan. But Ivan Taylor decided to go to Michigan, and there's really nothing Notre Dame can do at this point to sway him. I think that recruitment is done and over with. Like, the Irish might continue recruiting Derek Meadows, and I'm sure that Marcus Freeman is going to be, in the mix a little bit with some of the other guys that didn't commit to Notre Dame. But I think the ship has sailed with Ivan Taylor. So Notre Dame had to figure out an alternative, and they ended up getting Brandon Logan to round out their class of defensive backs. They have 6 total defensive back commits right now, 3 safeties, Jaden Blair, Ethan Long, and now Brandon Logan. And they have 3 corners in Dallas Golden, Mark Zachary, and Cree Thomas. It's not as good of a class as it could have been had Ivan Taylor stayed committed. And if Taylor had stayed committed, I don't think Brandon Logan would have flipped from Vanderbilt as a baseball player to come to Notre Dame, because I don't think Notre Dame would have offered him a scholarship. It would have only been a preferred walk-on. Now the situation has changed. But still, this is a really good class of defensive backs. It's just not elite, and it's not one of the best hauls that Notre Dame has ever had, which I thought was a real possibility a couple months ago, at least at that position. But still, it's a really good group with a ton of potential, and it's certainly much improved compared to some other classes in the past, specifically at this position. I mean, you look at Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary. Those are 2 stud cornerback prospects, and now they're a little bit overlooked because they've been committed for a while, and fans are sort of like just down in the dumps over the fact that they lost out on Taylor and they lost out on some other guys. But those are 2 really, really talented prospects who can make a name for themselves immediately at Notre Dame. Jane Blair is a really talented safety prospect. And then Ethan Long, Brandon Logan, and Cree Thomas are all interesting prospects who are developmental but could have really good futures at Notre Dame as well. So I think the fact that Irish fans are disappointed in how this defensive back class ended up should tell you how much improvements have been made on that front. And it's a testament to Mike Mickens and the staff, because they have been able to improve at recruiting in that position so much for the past few years that now Notre Dame just has a really good class, and fans are like, I don't know how I feel about it, or I don't know, it just could have been better. That's true, but I still think that this is a really good group. And for all the uncertainty about Notre Dame's class of 25 as a whole, I feel really good about this group and what they're going to be able to accomplish at Notre Dame. All right, coming up in segment 3, Notre Dame sits at 22 commits with 4 months until signing day. Are they going to finish strong, or is the downward spiral going to continue? Today's episode is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. So one thing I've learned since I started covering recruiting on a regular basis is that it is an absolute roller coaster. Maybe more specifically, it's just a series of peaks and valleys and a tale of two extremes going on at all times. Because when things are good on the recruiting trail, things are really good. Like, commitments usually come in waves and fans get super excited. The future looks really bright. Everything is good. Everything is clicking. The program, everyone's aligned and everyone feels good when the guys who you've been recruiting for a while commit to your school and it's the prospect you've wanted and now they're committed and it feels so good, right? And then another commitment comes and then more come because all of a sudden that pitch starts hitting. Guys want to come. They've been talking and things are going good. But when things are bad, they're really, really bad. When you go through a dry spell, Notre Dame's not getting anyone to commit, or any school, right? Or you sprinkle in a couple of decommits, it seems like the sky is falling, all hell is breaking loose because someone dared pick another school over your favorite team. It's not a whole lot of fun. That's true for every single team, though. But the thing is, we're so concerned with Notre Dame. That's what this show is about. That's the team that you care about. You are so focused on Notre Dame that you don't really acknowledge the day-to-day highs and lows that go on with other programs. And I'm not saying this to try to make it seem like Notre Dame has not been in a slump on the recruiting trail. They absolutely have been. There's no denying that. It all started with the Ivan Taylor flip. That was a bad break. Then they missed out on Derek Meadows and Dylan Robinson. And lately, it's kind of seemed like Deuce Knight is going to decommit any day now. But just because they've been down doesn't mean that they're going to be down forever. Notre Dame could still finish this class strong. Just look at Auburn, right? They have the momentum, or at least they had the momentum with Deuce Knight after their Big Cat weekend. Their Big Cat weekend was when they had a bunch of guys come on their campus for their official visit. They roll out the red carpet. Everything is designed for those guys to have a good time, and they did. They got like 8 commits in the span of 4 days, and that's a big reason why a lot of people thought that Deuce Knight was going to be the next one to do it because they had so much momentum. All these really talented players are committing, and then those players can talk to Deuce and be like, hey, man, look at what we're building over here. Come over and join us. It's a very compelling pitch. It happens all the time. But think back a couple months ago, you probably weren't paying attention to Auburn recruiting. Well, they were in a slump, a dry spell. Fans were like, what the hell is going on? Kalen DeBoer is this new coach at Alabama. We're in a post-Saban era. They had all this hope and optimism that as soon as the big bad Nick Saban went away, they would start killing it on the recruiting trail. Well, it didn't happen right away. It took some time. And now they have a lot of momentum, and maybe that continues all the way through signing day. Right now, they have a top 10 class in the 24/7 sports composite. Lately, for Notre Dame, it's been the complete opposite. They were at one point the top-ranked class in the entire country. Now they're down to like 7, and that could go lower. But as I was saying, this isn't a permanent state of affairs. It could switch like that. So for Notre Dame, how do they finish the class strong? How do they turn things around? Well, the first thing they got to do is they got to keep Deuce Knight. And I'll be completely honest, I totally thought he was going to decommit last week. That's what all the signs are pointing to. Deuce Knight was going to flip to Auburn last week. I was basically fully prepared to do an emergency podcast, talk about it, break it all down. I had the thoughts, the points, everything ready to go. Hasn't happened yet. Maybe by the time you're listening to this, it has happened. But at the time of this recording, Monday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, Deuce Knight, still a member of the Notre Dame class of 2025. The longer this goes on, I feel like the better chance Notre Dame has of keeping him. I would still say it's unlikely, but I think Auburn wants to move quickly with their quarterback recruiting. They have a bunch of NIL money to throw it around. They try to get Julian Lewis, the USC commit. Didn't happen. Seems like Lewis wanted a little bit more money. Auburn wasn't willing to match whatever they were asking for, so then they moved on to Deuce Knight. If they want to move on from Deuce Knight, there are other talented quarterback prospects in the South that they could go after. We are going to have to wait and see. But the fact that he hasn't done it yet, certainly encouraging for Notre Dame. Then Notre Dame also has to get 1 or 2 of the elite linebacker prospects that they're in the running for. The linebacker Matt Framo out of Southern California or Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng out of IMG Academy in Florida. There was a point, I think, after the June official visits where it seemed like Notre Dame was going to get both of those guys. Things have certainly quieted down since then, which makes sense because it's not the weekend after the official visit. But I am not surprised at all that Wojciak is taking his recruitment into the fall. That guy loves the recruiting process. He has a ton of really good suitors. He is going to wait and hear this out, and I think it's going to go all the way until the very end with him. Manfremo, I honestly thought he'd make his commitment a little bit earlier, but he's taking his time. That's okay. As long as Notre Dame gets one of those guys, then they'd have a really good linebacker class. If they get both, now we're cooking. Then they got to flip a wide receiver. After they missed out on Tanu Kynes, Dylan Robinson, and Derek Meadows, they really were just left with Elijah Burris and Jerome Bettis Jr., who might end up being a safety. One wide receiver prospect in this class is not going to cut it. Jace Brown is a guy that they've been looking into lately. Jace Brown is currently committed to UCLA. He's not really highly rated right now, but he's 6'4", 200 pounds. He's a 3-star. Very athletic, has been gaining a lot of momentum this offseason on the camp circuit, so I think he's a guy who's going to really improve his ranking over the course of his senior season. And if Notre Dame was able to get him, that would be a step in the right direction. No, it's not a one-for-one replacement with Derek Meadows. Still a step in the right direction. It's really difficult to project how all of these things are going to shake out because they also have to keep all of the guys currently committed outside of Deuce Knight. They have to retain them as well. The only thing that I feel confident in saying is that this is going to last until signing day. We have about 4 months left until the early signing period in December, and it is going to be a process throughout that entire time. Notre Dame is going to have to continue working on all of these recruits if they want to finish this class strong. They've got holes in this class, and the coaching staff is not just going to sit back and let it get picked apart. They're going to work tirelessly to retain their commits and add more. It's something we know about Marcus Freeman, something we know about Chad Bowden. They are not going to get outworked. They might not win every battle. As a matter of fact, they've lost a lot, but they're going to work tirelessly to make sure that Notre Dame brings in the best possible class they can. But with that in mind, and the fact that this timeline is probably going to go on throughout this college football season, I think the success or failure of this season is going to go a long way with these recruits. There's even more pressure on the Irish to have a great season because it's going to directly impact their future as well. Like if you're Deuce Knight right now and you want to take your recruitment into the fall and you have questions about how good you can really be in Notre Dame's offense, say they go out there and they light it up against Texas A&M and they continue to have a really great season on offense, all of a sudden that recruiting pitch from Mike Denbrock is going to be a little bit different, right? You're not watching highlights of Jane Daniels at LSU anymore. You're watching Riley Leonard kill it at Notre Dame, and it's going to make you more certain that you can be a really successful quarterback at Notre Dame when you see it, when there's proof of concept and all these cells that are coming your way from Mike Denbrock, who was just the offensive coordinator at LSU. When you get to see it play out in Notre Dame Stadium, in the blue and gold, it's going to hit a little bit differently. The same can be said about Manfremo and Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng. Notre Dame has had good defenses in the past, but if they continue to build on that defense and you see these young linebackers making plays, it becomes even more enticing to those guys to commit to Notre Dame. So there's a lot of time left, a lot more moves to be made, and just believe me when I say I'm going to be here every step of the way to cover it all. But that is going to do it for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish first listen of the day. I'm going to be right back here tomorrow morning to break down the Notre Dame linebackers that I was just talking about. The Irish obviously have to replace a ton of snaps at the position after J.D. Bertrand and Maris Leofau left for the NFL, but there are plenty of reasons to be excited about this young group of guys, and obviously the veteran Jack Heiser leading the way. For your second listen, remember to check out the Locked On College Football podcast with his host, Spencer McLaughlin. Does a great job covering the sport from a national perspective. Also, remember to subscribe to the show on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast, and I'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place.